also announced what she says is a full circle moment, and that's a brand collaboration with Soho House. So Meghan posted this video to Instagram.
People don't just walk away from their homes in total silence unless something behind closed doors already shifted. In Montecito, Prince Harry thought he finally locked in peace, far from palace rules, far from royal pressure, far from old ghosts. Instead, what he found waiting there flipped everything upside down. According to whispers now moving fast among palace watchers, Harry didn't stumble onto rumors or messy gossip. He came across files, real records, tied to a place he believed belonged to an old, closed chapter of Meghan Markle's life. One name kept coming back again and again: Soho House. This wasn't some dramatic bombshell that blew up in one moment. It was slower, heavier, and way more unsettling. Names stacked up, dates lined up, access points connected, patterns formed that didn't match the story Harry thought he fully understood. Once those dots connected, staying comfortable became impossible. This isn't about a public scandal breaking, it's about realization, about what happens when reinvention crashes straight into documented history, and why a prince who once ran from the palace may now be running from the truth itself. Harry didn't expect to find anything at all when he opened that folder. No bold labels, no warning stamps, no dramatic markings. Palace-linked intermediaries later claimed it appeared during routine legal prep, part of quiet reviews tied to security, reputation, and background checks. These reviews don't happen loudly. They happen when pressure is building somewhere else. One location dominated the paperwork.
Everybody, it's Meghan Markle from Suits. You are here with me today on my August fashion feature for Good Housekeeping magazine.
Soho House. For years, it had been brushed off publicly as a minor detail in Meghan Markle's pre-royal life. A stylish members club, a creative hangout, a place where actors and producers casually cross paths. That version made everything sound light and harmless. But the file painted a far more structured picture. Inside elite circles, Soho House isn't just a social club. It's infrastructure. Membership isn't random. Access is controlled. Introductions are intentional. Travel tied to openings is logged. Guest overlaps are remembered, even if they never hit public records. And when institutions review the past, they aren't hunting drama, they're tracking patterns. This is where Meghan Markle reappeared inside the institutional frame in a way Harry had never been shown before. The file didn't accuse anyone. It didn't speculate. It simply mapped dates of international Soho House openings, cities where Meghan appeared without clear professional obligations, and overlaps with individuals already linked to private flights, yachts, and invite-only environments elsewhere in official documentation. Nothing looked shocking on its own. But taken together, the picture felt unfamiliar and unsettling. Harry believed this chapter had already been explained, placed in context, and closed. What shook him wasn't a single detail. It was the realization that the palace never considered it closed at all. Inside Buckingham Palace, this wasn't fresh information. According to palace sources, advisors flagged Soho House years earlier during early vetting, not as a threat, but as a variable.
It's so much fun. We have 8 different looks, all with really accessible, fun, summery designs. It's been a great way to explore
A quiet corridor where many people pass through, often leaving little behind except memory. At the time, it didn't trigger action, but it was never forgotten. The relationship was moving fast, almost too fast. Harry was already emotionally locked in, and pushing back too hard at that stage would have blown everything up. So the palace did what it always does in situations like this. It documented and stepped back. No confrontation, no emotional scenes, just quiet recording and patience. That's how the system works. It doesn't move without leverage, and it doesn't confront without certainty. What Harry later saw in Montecito was the outcome of years of that silence. As he went through timelines, dates, and cross-referenced entries, disbelief hit first. People familiar with his reactions say he immediately assumed something was missing. Context had to exist somewhere else. Explanations had to be buried in another file. He started asking questions fast. Who compiled this? When was it started? And why had he never been shown any of it before? The answers came back cold and procedural, not emotional. The material had been assembled slowly, updated whenever new information surfaced, and never escalated because escalation demands certainty. The palace didn't need proof, it needed awareness. That distinction matters. And this is exactly where the internal divide inside the palace became clear. One faction, mostly senior courtiers and legal advisors, shaped by the Prince Andrew fallout, believed Harry should never have seen the file at all.
House started in London in the 90s, and then now it's all over the world. There are 42 locations. So there's a gym.
In their view, the danger wasn't institutional, it was emotional. Harry's mental balance mattered more than transparency. Opening old corridors of information would only destabilize him further, and they believed protecting him meant shielding him. Another faction strongly disagreed. Their argument was blunt and practical. Harry was no longer a working royal. He was making his own decisions, publicly, financially, and without palace oversight. If outside investigations, testimony, or legal pressure ever crossed paths with Soho House records, Harry couldn't afford to be unaware. Not to react publicly, but to prepare privately. That argument won. The file stayed open, and Harry stayed exposed. For him, the emotional impact landed immediately. This wasn't a rumor pulled from tabloids. This was institutional memory. Dates lining up with moments Meghan had previously described differently. Travel once framed as coincidence now appeared patterned. Access once called casual networking now looked curated and intentional. When Harry finally raised the issue with Meghan, the reaction was sharp and defensive. According to accounts shared through intermediaries, she dismissed the file outright as palace paranoia. She framed Soho House as social, not strategic. She accused the institution of exaggeration, of searching for meaning where none existed. But the moment that changed everything came next. She questioned why Harry would trust palace paperwork over her.
Of course, some members of my family will never forgive me for writing a book. Of course, they will never forgive me for lots of things.
That single question hit hard because it shifted the entire conflict. This stopped being about records or timelines. It became about loyalty. Harry, already shaken, suddenly found himself positioned as the problem simply for reading what had been kept. The file never accused Meghan of wrongdoing, never, but it challenged whether the story he believed was complete. And once doubt exists, it can't be unread. The stakes rose fast. According to those close to the situation, Harry didn't lash out. He pulled inward, quietly, privately. He stopped talking about future plans. He delayed decisions. Joint appearances became rare. The Montecito house didn't turn hostile, but it became brittle, tense, like something that could crack at any moment. The antagonist here wasn't Meghan. It wasn't the palace either. It was the record itself. Records don't argue. They don't explain. They just exist, waiting to be interpreted. And once interpretation turns personal, the damage is real. So when Harry finally left Montecito, there was no announcement, no statement, no explanation, because there wasn't one that could be made without choosing sides. And at that point, no choice felt survivable. Leaving didn't mean ending the marriage. It meant stepping back from information Harry couldn't mentally sort through yet. Distance wasn't about punishment or drama. It was about space. Space from documents that kept replaying in his head. Space from details that refused to line up cleanly. Back in London, the palace stayed completely quiet. No statements.
Kinsey, I'm not sure if I'd describe it as a full circle moment, but she loves any excuse to call Prince Harry H and also to remind people of...
No reassurance. They didn't need to speak. Institutions trust time more than words. And once a file is opened, it never fully goes quiet again. By the end of this chapter, Harry came to a realization that changed everything moving forward. The palace hadn't discovered Soho House. It had always known. The difference now was simple and heavy. Harry knew too. After the file surfaced, the energy in Montecito shifted fast. Not explosive, not dramatic, just measurable. Conversations got shorter, decisions slowed. According to people familiar with the situation, the house felt stalled, like everyone was walking around unfinished sentences. Harry stopped treating the information as background noise and started treating it like something that needed confirmation. His next move wasn't emotional, it was procedural. He asked who built the file. The answer shook him more than the contents. There wasn't a single author, no architect, no mastermind. The file was an accumulation. Notes from early vetting, updates added when familiar names or dates popped up elsewhere, references pulled from travel records, membership overlaps, and third-party briefings. It wasn't written to tell a story, it was built to preserve memory. That distinction mattered. Harry had always believed institutions tell stories when they want outcomes. What he was facing now was colder than that. Institutions collect information even when they don't yet know what it means. They don't need conclusions. They don't need accusations. They only need relevance. Harry asked directly if the file contained allegations. He was told it did not. He asked if it suggested wrongdoing. Again, no. Then he asked the question that changed the tone entirely. Why did it exist at all? The answer came back clean and simple. because Soho House functioned as a controlled access environment.
Part of that, and now the connection makes sense.
There's connections, guys.
Wow.
And because Meghan Markle's presence there had intersected repeatedly with individuals already documented for unrelated reasons. That explanation raised the stakes instantly. This was no longer about hiding the past, it was about connection, about how her past intersected with a place the palace had always treated as a corridor between worlds that rarely cross publicly. The file didn't claim anything happened inside those rooms. It didn't suggest behavior. It only confirmed who passed through them and how often. As Harry's reaction shifted from disbelief to anxiety, people close to him say his questions narrowed. Which cities? Which years? Did any of these overlaps predate their relationship? Did any align with moments he had been told differently? Each answer brought clarity, but took comfort away. Nothing directly contradicted Meghan's explanations, but nothing fully backed them either. The gaps stayed open, and once gaps exist, they invite doubt whether anyone wants them to or not. When Harry raised these questions at home, the response hardened. Meghan framed the file as institutional overreach. She argued Soho House was being misrepresented, that normal networking was being retroactively turned into suspicion. She questioned why old records were resurfacing now, and reminded Harry that the palace had never been neutral toward her. From her point of view, the file wasn't concern, it was bias. And that framing locked the conflict in place, because at that moment, the issue stopped being about information. It became about trust, perspective, and whether the past was being examined fairly or weaponized after the fact. Harry found himself trapped between two very different authorities, and neither was backing down. On one side stood the palace, cold, careful, and technical. They spoke in measured language.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Refused to draw conclusions and hid behind procedure. On the other side was his wife, who framed the issue as deeply personal, calling it a betrayal and demanding trust over paperwork. The conflict stopped being about facts entirely. It became about which framework Harry was willing to accept and which one he could live with. Inside the palace, the divide cracked open again. One faction believed Harry should disengage completely. Their view was blunt. Once institutional information spills into a marriage, it loses its usefulness. Their priority wasn't strategy, it was Harry's emotional stability. They feared escalation, pressure, and collapse. Their advice was simple: step back, stop digging, and let the file stay buried inside palace walls. Another faction saw that approach as unrealistic. They argued disengagement was already impossible. Harry knew the file existed, and knowledge doesn't vanish once it lands. They warned that outside pressure, media scrutiny, legal developments unrelated to Harry or future testimony could drag those records into wider view eventually. From their perspective, information wasn't harm. It was protection. Painful, yes, but necessary. Harry didn't align with either group. Instead, he quietly withdrew from both sides. According to people familiar with his behavior, he stopped asking the palace for clarification. He stopped debating the issue at home. Rather than confronting or resolving anything, he entered a phase of quiet avoidance. Travel plans were delayed. Public commitments were postponed. Physical space widened. Emotional distance followed. No announcements, no dramatic exits, just absence. And without anyone naming it out loud, the stakes rose again. At one point, Harry asked a narrow but critical question: had the file ever been shared outside palace walls? The answer was no, but it came with a condition that mattered more than the denial itself.
I'm meeting some producers about a film. Fingers crossed.
I'm feeling it.
Are you?
This is your time. I'm feeling
good
whatever you
about
do
it.
today.
Institutional memory does not expire. Files don't disappear. They get referenced when circumstances shift. If Soho House became relevant again in the future, the records wouldn't reappear as accusations, but as context. That was the moment the long-term reality settled in. This wasn't something an interview could clean up. There was no single claim to deny, no allegation to knock down, just a preserved pattern sitting quietly, waiting for relevance. Meghan's response to that realization was practical. According to people close to her, she believed distance was the solution. Distance from the palace, distance from its records, distance from its logic. In her view, the institution's refusal to act proved the file meant nothing. If it mattered, action would have happened already. Since it didn't, the past should stay closed. Harry didn't find that comforting at all. He'd been raised differently. He understood institutions don't move until they have to. Silence wasn't proof of irrelevance, it was proof of patience. And patience, once activated, doesn't expire. That difference in interpretation widened the personal divide fast. Harry began spending more time away from Montecito. Not headline trips, quiet absences, time with advisors, time alone. Time rethinking decisions he once believed were locked in. Observers say he didn't seem angry anymore. The shock phase was over. What remained was recalibration. The antagonist here wasn't Meghan. It wasn't the palace either. It was the clash between narrative and record. Narratives need coherence. Records don't. They tolerate contradiction and wait it out. Harry had spent his adult life trying to control the narrative.
Edie is hanging out with people that are terrible already.
Yeah, we knew that, dude.
Well, I just keep going back to that connection where Prince Andrew and Marcus Andrew.
The file forced him into the world of record, where control is limited, patience is endless, and time never takes sides. By the end of this phase, the decision to leave Montecito was already locked in, even if no one had said it out loud yet. This wasn't about running away or making a dramatic exit. It was about creating enough space to think without the constant pressure to pick a side. From the palace's perspective, this moment didn't require a response. They hadn't pushed. They hadn't accused anyone. They had simply allowed information to exist, and now the consequences of that existence were unfolding on their own. As Harry prepared to step away, one truth settled in hard. Once institutional files are opened, they don't close just because someone wants peace. They close only when relevance fades. And relevance, once established, almost never disappears. That realization didn't bring relief, it brought distance. And for Harry, distance had become the only way to feel like he had any control left. By the time he physically left Montecito, the palace had already decided it would stay out completely. No clarification, no denial, no comfort. From an institutional standpoint, there was nothing to resolve publicly. No accusations had been made, no claims issued. What existed was information, and information alone doesn't trigger action inside Buckingham Palace. Internally, the situation was labeled internal awareness with external sensitivity. That label carries a clear response: observe, document, do not engage. Engagement creates obligation. Silence preserves flexibility. This strategy wasn't agreed on instantly, though. One faction, largely made up of senior communications advisors, worried Harry's absence would spark speculation. In their view, silence would look like crisis. They argued a limited reassurance could calm things down. No details, just stability. But another faction pushed back hard. Legal and protocol advisors warned that even a mild statement would create a public paper trail connecting the palace to Soho House records. Once that link existed, it couldn't be erased. Their position was firm. The palace should neither validate nor dispute information it had never publicly acknowledged. That faction won. From the palace's perspective, Harry was no longer a working royal. His home, his marriage, and his personal choices were outside institutional responsibility. The palace believed it had already done what was appropriate, provided awareness and access to records. What Harry chose to do with that knowledge was his decision alone. Harry didn't experience this neutrality as balance. According to people familiar with his reaction, it felt like abandonment. In his mind, the palace's refusal to deny the file confirmed its significance. Silence meant something very different to him. For the institution, silence meant containment. For Harry, silence felt like acknowledgement. That gap in interpretation widened the emotional distance that had been growing for years. As Harry relocated temporarily, advisors on both sides reassessed risk. For the palace, the risk was reputational association. Any visible alignment with Harry during a period of uncertainty could pull the crown into future disputes. Distance lowered exposure. That calculation wasn't personal, it was procedural. For Harry, the risk was internal coherence. He now had to reconcile two realities that refused to sit comfortably together. The woman he loved had presented her past as settled, and the record sitting in institutional memory suggested something far more complicated. The institution Harry came from had preserved that same past as unfinished, open-ended, and unresolved. No one accused anyone. No one offered closure. And that's where the real antagonist finally became clear. It wasn't Meghan Markle. It wasn't the palace. It was record versus narrative. Narrative survives on trust. Record survives on retention. And when those two drift apart, institutions will always stand with the record. Individuals, on the other hand, often cling to narrative. Harry was trapped between those forces with no clean way forward. According to people familiar with Meghan's thinking, her response to Harry's departure reflected that divide clearly. She viewed his need for distance as unnecessary and excessive. From her perspective, the file proved nothing. The palace's refusal to act confirmed its irrelevance in her eyes. She believed the correct move was to ignore institutional memory entirely and keep building a future untouched by it. Harry didn't share that certainty. He had been raised inside systems where documentation defines legitimacy, not intention. He understood something deeply ingrained in palace logic. The institution rarely moves fast. It waits, it observes, it lets relevance reveal itself over time. That understanding made it impossible for him to dismiss the file as meaningless, even without accusations attached. As days passed, the situation stabilized on the outside and hardened on the inside. No statements were released, no leaks surfaced. The palace stayed silent. Media speculation stayed contained because there was nothing solid to chase. From an institutional standpoint, the strategy worked exactly as designed. For Harry, though, silence didn't mean resolution. According to people close to him, time away from Montecito became about more than one file. He began reassessing fast decisions, assumptions he had accepted without checking, conflicts he had once framed as persecution instead of warning signs. The Soho House records didn't give him answers. They forced questions he could no longer ignore. And the most destabilizing realization wasn't about the past, it was about the present. If the palace had always known and simply chosen to wait, then leaving the institution hadn't erased its memory. It had only removed Harry from its protection. The knowledge still existed. The files still existed. They just no longer required his involvement. That realization permanently shifted Harry's posture. He didn't return to Montecito with demands or ultimatums. He returned changed, more cautious, less absolute. According to those who observed him afterward, he stopped chasing certainty and started preparing for ambiguity. This is how royal stories usually end. Not with confrontation, but with structure doing its work. The palace didn't need to say a single word. Information had been shared. Responsibility had been transferred. Silence protected the institution while leaving the individual to handle the consequences. For Prince Harry, leaving Montecito wasn't about escaping the past. It was about accepting a hard truth. Once the past is documented, it doesn't vanish when ignored. It waits, and when it resurfaces, it does so on institutional terms, not personal ones. That was the reality Harry finally faced. And in royal life, discovery rarely closes stories. It simply rearranges them and forces people to live inside what remains. If you watch this and have thoughts, drop them in the comments below. If this breakdown made you see things differently, hit subscribe and stay locked in for more deep dives like this. Don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who needs to see it.